Hello everybody, welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we're doing a box office breakdown for this past weekend, which saw Novocaine get the #1 spot, meaning that Mickey 17 has not been able to hold on to it and has seen a pretty significant drop, especially for a film of its size, dropping 60% from its first opening weekend last week, making only $7.5 million, and also conveniently making $10,000 more in the initial projections than the new film Black Bag. Now, it'll of course be over the next couple of days that we get the actual numbers for the weekend. These are just projections, but this means that Black Bag, this new film from Focus Features, could actually end up sliding into that #2 position, which could mean that Mickey 17 drops to the #3 spot. Either way, whether it be the #2 or 3 spot, this is a very slow box office weekend and just continues to show just how much Hollywood has fallen by the wayside, right? How little they understand about the modern audiences, how little they understand about making films that people actually want to go see. And though there are, of course, these movies that will come out that can bring out a lot of people to the theater, and there also are a lot of other films that are really, really good that unfortunately people just don't go and see because people in today's world don't really appreciate independent film or really good cinema to the same degree as maybe they once did. The fact is that this is an abysmal weekend, and with next weekend's release of Snow White coming up, that means that though it might have that little bit of a boost in the box office, I already saw Tony at Deadline trying to say like, oh man, can't wait for next weekend, it's going to really inject some life into the box office. Like, well, yeah, maybe in comparison to the last few weeks, which again have been some of the worst that we have seen in 2025 so far, all of which is indicating that this movie year will again be really, really low, and nothing compared, of course, to 2019's numbers, and also continuing just to show that audiences are really just fleeing modern Hollywood for many various different reasons. But the fact that you're looking forward to a film like Snow White, which cost a crap ton of money and is expected to come in well underneath what the initial projections were, and that's what you're excited about? Yeah, please tell me that you're shilling without telling me that you are shilling for these massive companies. Of course, what is to expect from a company like Deadline. Let's go ahead, though, and dive into these numbers, though, just to point out exactly what's going on with Novocaine, new film, Black Bag, The Last Supper, and a couple other newer releases as well, and some updates as well to some of the other films that we have been covering here on the channel. So first, of course, Novocaine took the #1 spot domestically. $8.7 million is where this film opened up, which is about where we would expect this film to open. There were some early indications that this film might have been able to get around $10 million domestic. That did not happen. So clearly, though, the movie was able to perform about as well as what you saw over the likes with Box Office Theory, who had initially reported that they thought the film was going to make around $8.8 million. Again, that's a pretty close number, pretty close indicator there. There was some early signs from the Thursday and Friday numbers that it might have actually been trending towards being closer to 10. But that obviously did not happen. Again, these movies have been falling off quite a bit just in general at the box office on the Saturday and Sundays, not performing as well as maybe some other films have done historically. So whereas the Thursday premieres and the Friday numbers have been showing up about where some people have been projecting, it's the Saturday and Sunday that seem to be a bit tougher for people to be able to predict because, again, the market has changed and shifted so much over time. But even so, Novocaine was still able to take the #1 spot, take the top spot. The film also only cost about $18 million to make, which means the break-even point is not nearly as high for a film like this. The word of mouth on it has been relatively good over on Critic List. There is currently a solid rad score for this movie with the handful of reviews that are over there. But even with that being the case and that word of mouth potentially being there, we're not really seeing it currently with the numbers, right? If we were seeing this film coming in well above or even slightly above the initial projections, we would be saying, okay, word of mouth might actually be able to push this film to the moon up against its budget. But where it is right now, actually, it is indicating that this movie likely won't hit its break-even point and likely will lose some box office money. And again, it's a little too soon to say. We'll know for sure next weekend once we get those week 2 drops and also where this film is, opening internationally. And once all those numbers update, obviously that could also impact these things. But again, kudos to them for making a film that is doing better than anyone could have expected it to. And it definitely feels like a movie that is, a la a John Wick or even a film like Nobody, film that I'm actually intrigued by and want to go see at some point, but also not one that drives me to the theater to go go see it Thursday night in its premiere. So again, it kind of speaks to why the weekend has just not been all that good. Mickey 17 was finally able to see it. This film is not as bad as some people have indicated. It is still not a good film, and it's primarily because, if not only because, of Mark Ruffalo's performance in the movie. It is so bad, it is so atrocious that it makes the movie bad. It's not very often that a single actor's portrayal, a single actor's performance is able to drag a film down to that level and to that degree, but also it speaks more so to the really impressive performance given by Robert Pattinson, because his performance is actually the only reason why I would give the film a decent score, and barely a decent score, because though the film is dragged down absolutely by Mark Ruffalo, the story is also a little bit of a mixed bag, right? There are some really cool concepts that are built in there, some really cool ideas that are thrown in there, but it's also a bit of a jumbled mess as well, which again is something that's very sad, because it was one of my most anticipated films 2 years on, right? It was initially coming out last year and then got delayed to this year. So it was on my most anticipated list twice, and it let me down quite a bit, though I will say Robert Pattinson was phenomenal. A lot better than I even would have expected. When people said, oh yeah, he was great in the movie, it took the actual seeing him in that movie, and whatever voice he was doing, I was like, man, okay, I don't even hear Robert Pattinson anymore at this point, so kudos to him. Still, was not able to save the movie by any means, and also was clearly not able to save its box office either. $7.51 million, a 60% drop from last week for a smaller budgeted film, for a smaller release like this. Again, pretty massive budget of $118 million, but for a smaller box office maker, drops like that in your second weekend are actually really, really bad, right? We expect to see 60 to 70 to 80% drops for the massive Marvel films, right? The ones that have the people coming out opening weekend, and then that's pretty much it. You don't have that same level of people showing up opening weekend for smaller films, or for more independent films, or just for more niche titles, like a Mickey 17 would be, for instance. And so this is, again, a very bad sign for them. And right now we can project this film will end up losing well over $100 million by the end of its run. More on that in a little bit. Number 3 film was Black Bag, $7.5 million. So we'll see whether or not it actually made more money than Mickey 17. It definitely did better per theater, so there is at least that going for it. But that film from Focus Features still not making a whole lot of money. But again, it is what it is. Captain America Brave New World, 35% drop off. Again, that sounds good on paper. And last weekend it actually made another $9 million internationally. And so we expect a similar number. That we're still waiting on some of these numbers to officially report. But yeah, basically, even though the movie is now, I can say, actually tracking to get to $400 million and actually maybe even past $400 million worldwide, when you're talking about that being your goal, or that being like the most impressive thing that you have done in your release, with a massive budget, which we know is more than the $180 million that they've been floating around there, continuing to push down people's throats, and also just how badly this is doing worldwide as far as an MCU film. Again, when you look and compare this movie to every other film in the MCU, going all the way back to those first movies, like the first Iron Man, the first Incredible Hulk, right? All MCU fair titles, you actually see this movie is going to be in the bottom 3 or 4 of those releases. This movie actually right now is doing worse than what the Incredible Hulk did at that same time. Now remember, you have to adjust those numbers for inflation, right? Even if you hate inflation, if you just look at ticket prices and how those have changed over time, a lot more people at this point have already gone to see Incredible Hulk than have gone to see Captain America Brave New World. So the fact that this movie's even in that discussion, and we all know everyone who thinks about Incredible Hulk says that was not a really impressive box office. In fact, that lost money at the box office when that movie came out. And it's also in the discussion with other films like The Eternals, right, from more recent days. Guess what? Same thing. This movie is also about where that film was, likely will pass that film. And so if the best thing this movie can do is make more money than The Eternals adjusted, yeah, that's not a very good goal, right? Those are bottom of the barrel MCU box offices, right? We're not even talking about net gains and net losses there. We're just talking about the total box office money that's being reported. This is abysmal news for them. And it continues just to go, just to get worse and worse and worse. Clearly, you can see Disney keeping it at over 3,000 screens is a bit ridiculous, because just no one's going to see the movie. But this is kind of what they are known for, is strong arming theaters, keeping their movies out longer than probably what they should be, and having probably a lot of empty theaters because of it, right? If you have 10 movie theaters all showing the same movie at the same time, and 20 people have gone to see the movie, right? They want those 20 people being reported, but they don't want the same number being reported about the number of people in individual theaters. theaters, right? So obviously Brave New World here doing abysmal. We'll talk more about the updated box office for that. A new film, technically, The Day the Earth Blew Up, a Looney Tunes movie from Ketchup Entertainment, an interesting distributor here. I believe it's available on VOD or has been available on VOD. So even though it says it's been 14 weekends in release, this is the first that I've really seen it or heard about it being talked about in a wide release fashion. So I don't know if it's just been in a very small number of theaters and then just grew to this one, right? There's no even theater chains being reported here. So that's where I'm a little bit confused, because it's acting like a new release as far as what's being reported, but technically it says 14 weekends. So okay, I don't know. $3.1 million there to get the number 5 spot. Another new film from Pinnacle Peak, The Last Supper, another religious film. $2.8 million there. Paddington Peru dropped 25%. Dogman 26%. The Monkey 37%, and Last Breath 44%. All those films doing about what you would expect. And A24 continuing its odd release schedule, 1,700 screens, so a pretty wide release for an A24 film at least. This film Opus made $1 million, so not really all that impressive there, but A24 is very interesting in how they handled their releases. All right, let's go to the global totals for these movies. So Novocaine, $10.5 million. As I mentioned, there was thought that the entirety of the films domestic would actually be upwards of $10 million. That did not happen. And as of right now, I'll go ahead and refresh. Right now, $1.8 million is what has been reported at the international box office. Now, ComScore, which is one of the many sites that brings together box office numbers, has not yet updated their, or at least last I had updated it, had not updated their total box office. And as you can see, they still have not, even though it says on there March 16th. These are numbers worldwide, 43.6. That's Mickey 17's opening weekend. So again, I don't know what's going on over there, but you could potentially, right, there are reports already out there about what Novocaine had done. So that's why I'm going with the 10.5, but theoretically could be in a little bit higher there. And obviously we'll wait for the actuals for us to say for sure. But yeah, 10.5 million. Overall, it's a decent type of opening, and the budget is right at only 18 million, but it also is, again, the modern box office that we have right now. And even at an $18 million budget, not a lot of people are going to see movies these days. And so even the smaller budget or the mid-budget films are losing money because no one is going to see these movies. And so again, it speaks more to Hollywood and the marketing for them and their lack of understanding of what audiences want, even though, again, I've heard good things about it. Again, seems to indicate that there's a huge marketing problem there, and then actually reaching out to audiences to convince them to spend the time and the money, the hard-earned money that people just don't have as much expendable income of these days to actually go out and see movies like this. Mickey 17 is a much worse example, right? Because this film cost $118 million and has only made $67.3 million as of the last update. So abysmal numbers here for this movie. This film also officially a flop, and we'll talk about that in a second. Black Bag, a film that has a lot of big actors, big names in it, but $11.7 million, really not all that impressive. Production budget of $60 million. This is actually not in my charting. I will be adding it to my charting probably later today, but a $60 million budget and $11 million opening. Oof. So even though this movie might be able to beat out Mickey 17, it's beating out another fellow flop in the box office considerations. Speaking of flops, Captain America Brave New World, $388 million. Again, look at the historical numbers there. Well below the average of where most films with its opening weekend have performed. So this movie has just done terrible across the board. Whether you're looking just at the domestics or just at the internationals, these are terrible numbers. Quantum Mania at the same point of release had $205 million domestically. So this film is still tracking well behind that movie, not only domestically, but also internationally. And so this movie is not going to get to the 470-ish million of Quantumania, but might be able to actually beat out and, be able to reach rather 400 million at the global box office, as I'd mentioned before, right? If you just look at these numbers, you can see that tracking, and you can see the possibility of at least that happening for this movie, of actually reaching 400 and passing it. If it's able to make another, if it drops another 30% next weekend, makes another $3 or $4 million or so next weekend domestically, is able to make another 3 or 4 million internationally. Guess what? That puts it right ahead, or right at the cusp of 400 million. So again, I do think the film will leg out to reach 400, barely cross it. It's not going to make much more than that, though, at this point. So, yeah, big victory for them to get to 400 million. It's still not going to be, it's going to be basically a Collider headline, which as we all know are just not trustworthy and are just clickbaity and just post a lot of false, fake information, half-truth information all the time, but it is still going to be a massive failure for them. The Day the Earth Blew Up has made $4 million. Again, I've heard decent things about this release, but just don't know that much about it. Interesting that the film was distributed by a company that was not Again, just really, really weird. This is how odd this film's release is that I'm stumbling over my words just to try to figure this out. But the fact that Warner Brothers is not involved, at least, again, with the actual release of it, and let's see, the production, Warner Brothers Animation was a part of it. It's just weird that Warner Brothers is not also putting this film out, is not distributing this movie either. I don't know if Ketchup Entertainment is some other production company that's underneath their umbrella or not. I'd never heard of it myself, but again, take that for what it's worth. The Last Supper, $2.8 million, another faith-based movie there. I have this movie up twice for some reason because, again, I'm tired. It's crazy. It's been a crazy weekend here at the house. Anyway, let's go to the charts because we love charts here on OMB Reviews. And so Novocaine, $10.5 million opening. Remember, most films tend to make 3 times their opening weekend, right? The multiplier globally by the end of most films' run is usually on average about 3 times that number. So that means Novocaine, we can project, will probably make around $30 to $35 million. Now, the film could obviously leg out, could obviously have good word of mouth, and do better than the average movie, in which case the break-even point would actually be possible. But based off of where it currently is, $18 million budget still means a break even of between 45 and 54. Remember, it does not get 100% of its box office receipts. Also, that $18 million does not account for marketing costs, which again tends to be about half the budget added on. And so because of that, right, $27 million total cost for your movie on average. Again, that could be more, could be less. The fact remains this movie is not right now currently on pace to hit that break-even point. We'll know for sure next weekend, but as of right now, it's not looking great. The only good thing is that because of its very small budget, it's only at a $21 million loss. And so you could make that up down the line with with just VOD sales or 4K Blu-ray sales or some other means, right? Selling the movie to be streamed on certain services, right? Otherwise, just going for free on your own service, not really going to account for much. But there are definitely ancillary ways of making money that you could potentially put to this movie. So it's doing okay, but it's still not quite at the point where it would really want to be very comfortable making that much money. All right, going to Mickey 17. We're waiting on some of these numbers here to update from Box Office Mojo, but we can say that the movie made around $67 million, by the end of its second weekend, according to thenumbers.com. And based off of that, we can project the film will make between $96 and $134 million by the end of its run. Again, that's just based off of where most films tend to perform after their first 2 weeks. And if that is indeed the case, then that means that it's going to lose between $119 and $96 million, which remember is using that 2.5 multiplier. So the chances actually of this being well over $100 million is now basically all but guaranteed. So this film is going to be a $100 million loser. It's not going to be the biggest box office loser of the year. That's still definitely going to be going to Brave New World, which even at 388, again, the numbers here haven't updated that much, still indicates this film is going to be a $200+ million loser when everything is said and done. Will probably be the biggest box office loser of this year, especially since, again, I think being conservative and being fair to the film of reporting it as a $300 million budgeted movie when the film likely cost a lot more than that. And again, the fact that people are still reporting $180 million is a bit egregious, especially if they're in the professional space for it. Paddington in Peru, right? Still some numbers here haven't been reported. It looks like there's some issues going on with some of the numbers being reported from thenumbers.com. $56 million currently in the red for this movie. But anyway, those are the numbers as they stand. You can look at this chart for more updates to films that you are yourselves tracking, if you are still tracking any of these films. But right now, we could say Novocaine, again, good jobs for winning opening weekend, beating Mickey 17, but that's not saying much. Still not a good box office result for the film. Mickey 17, officially a flop. Can't say we're all that surprised by that result. And then films like Last Breath still losing money. Monkey still adding on to its money. Captain America Brave New World still a big loser there. And so, again, we'll update these numbers as they come in. But what are y'all's thoughts about it? Have you seen Novocaine? Also, have you seen films like Black Bag? Again, movie that did better than probably what people expected it, but $60 million budget. You're not making your money back off of that, all right? That's just not likely going to happen based on the numbers that we're getting in front of us right now. So any thoughts about that or any of the other films mentioned in the comment section down below, let me know. And again, please make sure you smash that like button. Make sure you smash that Rumble button over. I don't know why I said it that way. Smash the Rumble button over on Rumble as well. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. I'm going to get out of here before I say anything else crazier than I already have. You guys are great. Have a wonderful rest of your day. A blessed Sunday, a blessed second Sunday of the great season of Lent. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to all of my Chosen of Valhalla members, starting off first with my people on Patreon, Father Luca Illich and Miss Martin Muses. Check out her YouTube channel by the same name, Miss Martin Muses. Also to my Subscribestar people, Matt317. Check out his Twitch channel by the same name, Matt317. And lastly to my YouTube member, Mr. Roy. Shout out to you, good sir. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, check out the top link in the video description below where you get access to that. Also, you get access to a plethora of other things. You get your name listed at the end of every live stream and video, like you saw in those names that came up before this video started. And also access to a giveaways channel that I host over on the Discord server where I give away 4Ks, Steelbooks, Blu-rays, all kinds of stuff. So check that out if you're interested in that. Also, I have an exclusive podcast that I hold at least once a month, and it's always a good time, and you get extra bonus content with that also. So if any of that sounds interesting, again, check out that top link in the video description below. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, God bless.